Did Jerome Powell deliberately crash the market? Is this a Fed rate emergency, and why was he so hawkish? The S&P 500 is down, Bitcoin is down, but is this a buying opportunity? What should we be doing? And ultimately, let's break down exactly what happened with Jerome Powell's speech earlier on. All of that in this video. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Let's get into it. So not only did Jerome Powell decide that he was going to wreck the cryptocurrency market and the S&P 500, Jim Cramer went bullish on Jerome Powell, which is always a problem. You know, the world ultimately evolves around what Jim Cramer thinks, and he went bullish. Well, guess what happens? The market tends to come and bite you in the backside, and that's exactly what happened. Okay, let's be a bit serious for a minute. So Bitcoin came down to $100,000 following a very hawkish FOMC, despite cutting rates by a further 25% basis points. We all thought that was going to be the case, but in fact, Bitcoin took a big dip. In fact, it was a pretty aggressive dip. And I think the reason not only is the fact that Jerome Powell was pretty hawkish around what could look like next year's rate cuts, but he also had this to say about Bitcoin.
Assets that have been buoyant. Do you see any value or benefit in the U.S. government building a reserve of Bitcoin?
We're not allowed to own Bitcoin. The Federal Reserve Act says what we can own, and we're not looking for a law change. That's the kind of thing for Congress to consider, but we are not looking for a law change at the Fed.
So if you look at it, I think Jerome Powell there making a statement, particularly when you think about what Donald Trump is trying to get through in terms of the Bitcoin strategic reserve. He absolutely steadfast in terms of the US dollar. But Powell signaled that policy rate can now be more cautious following the recent cuts, i.e. they've gone aggressive. Now they can ease that. Almost as you come into brake at the red light, you just decelerate a little bit slower. Adding the decision to move slower reflects higher inflation expectations and a path to uncertainty ahead. And in fact, that's probably true. Here in the UK, we actually are recording 8-month highs when it comes to inflation, driven predominantly out of food, predominantly out of fuel. Additionally, he said that potential rate cuts in 2025 will depend on market data. The London Stock Exchange revealed that US rate futures are pricing in just 2 rate cuts next year. Futures markets, however, pronounced in a 37 basis points cut in 2025. Additionally, odds of the prediction market, Kalshi, are now 90% towards no rate cuts in January 25. This is simply not what the market expected. And ultimately, like we said on that clip you saw, that the Fed is not allowed to own Bitcoin. So what does this leave us right now? Well, the reality there is I think a lot of people expected we were going to get a 25 basis points cut. And the same would then follow into 2025, aligned to a Trump administration, a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and generally the drill mechanic, which ultimately makes the big driver of inflation less. Well, simply, that's not the case. And in fact, you can already see some of the data starting to come out suggesting that it will be flat in January the 29th, equally flat, potentially even into March. This puts us in the middle of the year before we even start to consider a potential rate cut for the US inflation. Now, this can always move. A Trump administration may go after this in quite a big way. But what's really interesting is this is actually the Wall Street sharply fell as well, with a relatively big cut. In fact, the S&P 500 took a pretty heavy dip with almost a 3% decline, with the Nasdaq dropping about 3.6%. This wasn't specifically about Bitcoin. In fact, the whole financial market, maybe on the wave of a potential Trump administration, did not expect this. Quote, stubborn inflation is the root cause to slow cuts. Again, Jerome Powell giving his views specifically on what that looks like. But policymakers at the central bank lowered the benchmark federal funds rate by 0.25% to 4.25 to 4.5. This, again, will be the last decision before Trump is in office. 9 days later, we will take a vote again. So let's take a look at what's going on in the charts right now. Look, I talked about this on my live stream that Bitcoin came down to retest some key areas. The 20-day exponential moving average, equally the previous support that we had around this kind of 100K mark before a potential bounce. Now, are we going to see Bitcoin bounce back as we did last time? If you take back the last time we saw this kind of correction around in August, we got this big push down here with a relatively sharp increase. And in fact, from this base here, we then saw this moved all the way to the upside. So this not necessarily is the worst news in the world. Yes, it means the market's probably just going to ease off a little bit. The bullish sentiment of Donald Trump taking office has just wore thin, but actually we could see a bounce back up to around $102,000, $103,000 today, given market sentiment and going into the weekend. In my view, a nice consolidation into the weekend. Retail maybe buying a little bit, coming out in Christmas week with a nice little Wall Street pump to start with before just consolidating around 105,000 through the Christmas period and into Jan 2025. You may now see a slightly slower rate into that inauguration, but remember, this gives people the opportunity to buy back in. You can see in certain altcoins, they took a huge hit. Casper here at 12.7, which is pretty wild. But some coins, once again, starting to move. Just to give you an example on the S&P 500, look at that candle on the back of this news as well from the Fed rate. So no one was exempt here. And I think this is an important thing to reference when you're thinking about Bitcoin. You're maybe nervous about your portfolio. This was a market wide. This wasn't just strategically Bitcoin. This was much more than that. So again, I'm still very optimistic. Maybe not so much as quick as we're going to get there, but I'm still very bullish on 150, 180, maybe even $200,000 at the top of the bull market. But time will tell. Trump getting that reserve through is going to be important. But as always, we will keep you up to date right here on the 2Bit Crypto channel. So go ahead, smash that like button, and don't forget to subscribe and join our fantastic community. We're here every day to keep you ahead of the market. As always, thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.